And this is going to be week number 7. So after this one, we have only 3 more weeks to go. And let's see. On last couple weeks, what we are doing is how the logical conversation or debate or academic dialogue has to be like, which means you have to sort of understand the basic framework of rationality, logics, and then logical rational communication. So what we are doing is just looking at these logical rational framework on any academic process or procedure that you may be in. And one of the paradigms, the framework that we need to kind of understand and work on, especially in like a Western culture and in America, these are some of the key terms which the culture, whole culture, or democracy is based on. And as you may know, the ideal values of the democratic society, which is based on Christian values. So it came out of Christian values and teachings. Some would say it goes as far as a Hellenic culture, but more detailed, and the fundamental values of modern democracy is based on Christian values. So if you have to understand any Western or especially the American culture, it is absolutely necessary to understand the biblical values or Christian values. And these are the tolerance or the accepting the differences would be one of the major values that sustains this American culture and society. So we were looking at what's absolute and what's relatives. So if you have any belief, any religion of your own, if you believe in something, there's something that you believe as absolute and something that is relative. These things that are considered relative are the areas that you may tolerate someone else's view or different perspectives. When you cannot do that, we call that radicalism or fundamentalism. So radicals or fundamentals have very little room for relatives. And some of the ideas, modern ideas, it says there is nothing that is absolute. Every individual, every single person is entitled to have his or her own idea, and that's absolute for him or absolute for her. That means everything is relative. That's basically what the modern society, or what we call postmodernism, is pursuing. So every individual is entitled to his or her own belief, and no one has a right or authority to finger or determine or criticize someone else's belief. So that's total relativism. But Christianity, in Christian belief, there are things that are absolute, and there are things or areas that are relative. So you may choose what's absolute and what's relative, but the thing is, the Christianity, as we know, as we understand, there are a few things that are absolute. And we are, when you do what we call apologetics, what we are trying to do is to defend whatever you believe and think as absolute as a believer, as a Christian. So I gave you some examples last week. What are some of the absolute beliefs in Christianity? For example, the Godhead. God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. These three are the three different persons of God, yet they are one. So that's called Trinity. So we believe, Christians believe in Trinity, or Trine God, or three God in one God in three. And then also with that, special focus on Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus as the Messiah, the Son of God. That's another absolute belief. And we are trying to defend that as much as possible, according to the Bible. So that's the second thing. And then also virgin birth and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and so on. And then the church is also included in the what we call absolute value. Okay. The next item that we discussed last week was individuality, which means even within the Christian belief, within the same church, you may have 100, 200 members in your church if you're a Christian, but not all the believers have the same sort of belief. It is different from person A to person B, person C, and so on. So that's called individuality. Some cultures or some nations would not, they will not allow to have this individuality or anything that's relative. And that's called totalitarian society, culture, or state. And for example, in America, individuality is greatly emphasized, and it is permitted. So if you are as we are in America, the individuality is one of the major things that we pursue as Americans. And us of Asian culture, individuality is something very new to us. The culture and the nation and the society that we lived in Asia is more of communal. The community is more important than your individual freedom or individual choice or individual thought or beliefs. So most of us are from those society and the cultures that individuality is not so promoted, not so important. Now, when we are speaking of tolerance, it means a difference of thought and belief. When you have different thoughts and different beliefs, it will cause us to have what we call controversy. Your idea and opinion may be different from the idea and the belief of someone else. As long as you do not come across that person with a different belief, it will not cause you any issues. But as we try to live in this culture and society that we are in, you have to communicate, you have to encounter with someone else and others, whether it's a business or whatever. So, you cannot avoid to have these controversies, because there are always someone who tries to impose or pressure his or her belief to someone else. And when that happens, if you're a person, you feel offended, meaning you may get agitated, you may get angry, you may get, this very unwelcome feelings. And these are what we call controversies. And controversies also, it has to do with the conflict. So the conflict is one of the common issues in our existence. Whether you are Christian or not, any culture, any society would have this conflict of something. So conflict in relationship, conflict between the nations, and the conflict between religions, and so on. So what's going on in many of the places today? For example, the war between Russia and Ukraine, it is also a sort of conflict, and there are many, reasons for that, but basically it is caused by the conflict between two countries. So we need to understand this, the nature of the conflict and the controversy to understand the apologetics and then the principles underlying that. Okay. Now continuing, this is another the perspective or paradigm that you need to know and understand is what we call distortion. Distortion is a twisting of facts or twisting of truth. And it is common. Thank you. Common for our existence in the history, as you look back in the history of your own country or history of the whole world, there has been many distortions that happened by individuals, by society, the culture, and the government, and politics, and so on. So we, even today, there are more distortions than ever, because, for example, the fake news, for example. People are making up the stories, making up the false news that is not true. And that's a good example of distortion. The reason for someone distorting the truth is because usually it is because of a very self-centered, selfish ego. And they try to manipulate others so they have control over the people and then others. By doing so, they want to gain the benefits, profits, and advantages, and so on. So all the distortion that happens, it is because of the selfishness and self-centeredness and the ego and the greed of human being, which means as long as a human exists, there's a greed and selfishness that will cause people to, it motivates people to distort others. And if you have a power and authority over others, it is much easier to distort the truth. So the question with the apologetics is the Christian belief or the Bible, is there any distortion in it? And if you find any distortion in the Bible or Christian teachings, then you could say, no, it's not true. It's not true. The Bible is not true, therefore you don't believe in the Bible or God or Christianity or Jesus, whatever. So what others, other than Christians, are trying to do is to try to find any distortions or twisting of the truth in the Bible, in the Scripture, or in the Christianity. Okay? Of course, it is easy to find the distortion in Christian practice. Christian practices is different from the Christian belief itself. Even if the belief itself is true and it's truth and it is good, people, even Christians, especially those leaders, they can distort the truth, and it comes out as a result of distorted practice. And you will find many false and wrong and incorrect, unjust practices within Christian church. And it's true. And any religion has that. And I personally do not deny that there are some corruptions, sometimes distortion of even the truth, and then everything else that is bad can happen or did happen in Christian church. But that does not make the belief itself or truth as wrong or false. So we need to distinguish between the belief itself or the teaching itself and then the practice as a result of that belief. Because even the Christians, let's say the so-called born again true Christians, we do make mistakes. We can become false. We can become very greedy. And because of the sinful nature that is still in us, even the Christians, they can make a wrong practice, wrong behavior, but that does not make the truth itself as false. So we need to distinguish between the practice and the belief. And when we are doing the apologetics, we are not trying to defend the Christian practices or behaviors or rituals, whatever that's visible. But what we are trying to do is try to defend the Bible itself and then teachings and the belief of Christian truth. So we need to separate that. Again, going back to this, the bias elements in human perception. That's how we kind of switch, change, distort. The twist how we see the world, and they caused by first survival instinct, and second ego and self. The word itself, whether it's the Chinese, Korean, and the English version, it does not have negative connotation, negative meaning attached to it yet. So it's a kind of neutral. The word itself, the self. But when it becomes selfishness in English, and ego has this little negative connotation to it, since the Sigmund Freud used that particular word ego in his theory, but ego itself is a neutral. Again, the neutral self becomes selfish or greedy depending on how he or she wants to do with himself or herself. So that's a major thing that we are looking at when we see a human being, or when we evaluate someone else, and evaluate yourself especially. So all the religions, good religions, teach to look inside, in you and yourself, and try to find all these negative things and just put it away from you. That's what all the religions are teaching. Because all the religions agree that human beings are not perfect, us human beings does have this sinful nature, whether you call greed or selfishness, self-centeredness, or whatever. Now the third point, basic need and resources. What causes difficulties and troubles in human existence is because these commodities or resources are limited. And if you're familiar with the Bible and the Genesis, when God created the heaven and earth, and then Garden of Eden, everything was abundant. We had more than what we need. But after the fall, that's how the Bible sees what happens. The fall is alienation between God and Adam and Eve. They separate themselves, and that's called the fall. So after the fall, what happened is these resources and commodities become scarce, meaning it is not abundant. There is a limitation. Yet, when you calculate all the produces, the global produce, or the production of food for even 21st century, with is that 8 billion? I mean, the whole population of the earth. What we produce today over the earth, globally, can feed every human being abundantly. So the basic statistics says we have enough for everyone not to go hungry. So do you ask, why do people go hungry, and some in Africa, or for example, the people in Gaza, they're going starving. It's due to the war, so that's one reason. But even without the war and conflict, people are getting hungry, starved to death. And the reason for that is the greed and ego and selfishness. So when we are doing apologetics, with other belief or among the different religions, we need to understand the fact that there is this human ego that comes in and makes the system distorted. The reason I'm telling this is because one of the popular attack and then the question against Christianity is, if there is God, and that's one, the premise is one, and if that God is a good God, number two, then why there is this evil and then all the war and famine happening among the world population? So that would be the big question that usually non-believers kind of ask and attack against Christianity. And the answer comes right there. And you don't even need to quote the Bible. It is common and basic sense that human beings are not perfect. Not only they are not perfect, some human beings, they are very selfish, self-centered, and want to have more and more and more. So the resources are not divided equally. Those who have power and authority, they will become more rich. Means they will have more, and that means with the limited resources, some people has to go poor. So that's basic, answer to the question why and if there's God, why these things are happening. You don't need to even quote the Bible. There's an answer. So this is very important, understanding human nature. And human beings are very selfish, egoistic, and greedy, and so on. In other words, people are sinful. And if you don't accept that very idea that people are sinful, let me spell that out. Then you cannot continue that dialogue or the apologetics with anyone. So when we do this apologetics or the conversation with other religions or the non-believers, basically, do we agree that human beings are sinful? And if the other party cannot agree, then we don't have no further conversation or dialogue. So this would be one of the fundamental base for doing apologetics or the defense of Christian belief. So when we are trying to do defense of a Christian belief, there are a few things that we agree on. We don't need to agree that there is God. And that's not the subject. But we agree on the things what we know and what we can acknowledge. And one of that is human beings are sinful, basically. We are sinners. And if we cannot agree on that, then no further conversation is possible. We don't necessarily need to agree that on the existence of God. That would be one of the major issues that you can kind of discuss and debate in the field of apologetics. But knowing who we are, God is not visible, so we cannot agree whether God exists or not. We may disagree, but on human being, if you have a common sense, if we are a mature human being, then we know and we agree that we are sinful. Okay, next. Okay, there are two group of people or individuals, person A, person B, or religion A or religion B. What the apologetic is, actually it goes both ways. But let's say A is Christian, and when we say Christian apologetics, usually we try to respond to either a text or question from B. And that's how we answer or explain or defend Christian belief. That's what apologetic is. Now, when we do that, the question we need to look at is whose belief? Whose belief? The reason that we need to look at this is because many of us today in this 21st century world, whether you live in Islamic countries or states, or America, or some of those socialist state, everyone does have belief. So it's not the system itself, but it's a very individual thing. But what happens is, if you've grown up in countries or states where there is something that is called national or nationalism or national religion or state religion, then we need to think twice and ask this very question: whose belief am I believing about, believing in? So there is a difference between believing about and believing in. And in English language, at least, believing in is a solid and strong conviction of belief. But believe about, you heard that, you kind of agree, but you don't really believe in. So there is no commitment, there is no conviction, and there is no solid relationship between you and the belief. So we're trying to determine this. And that same goes for Christians. So many Christians who are attending church and coming to church are not really believing in, but believe about. So it's a big difference, actually, big difference. So let's try to ask this question. Cultural belief is a kind of belief. Cultural belief is a kind of belief. You grown up in certain culture, and the culture automatically teaches you what to believe and how to believe and how to behave and so on. So the culture is a very big thing, forming and creating and teaching, educating your belief. And you cannot avoid it. If you're a human being, as long as you live among the society and culture, if you're not living somewhere in the remote island in Asian Pacific, like Robinson Crusoe, we are not that. So if you're born into a culture, then culture automatically teaches you what to believe. So that's what we call cultural belief. And each culture tells you, you don't have choice. Again, this is a Lunar New Year. How do you know this is a Lunar New Year? Because the culture has been there 1,000 years, and every year, once a year, we celebrated that month and that day according to the moon. And it's a culture. And if you're grown up in one of these countries who celebrate Lunar Year, it's there. And we don't have choice. Next, another thing that is strong and kind of make you believe is it's a religion. So if you're born into, let's say, a Christian home, Christian family, you are more likely to go to church almost every Sunday if your parents are devoted Christian. And then by attending church, you kind of brainwashed and educated in good sense and learn how to behave and how to think as like a Christian. But that doesn't mean you are a Christian. So that's a kind of the religious reinforcement or formulation of belief as we grow up in a certain religion and certain culture. Political ideology. It'll be, again, it's one of the very strong influence making you believe in certain things. So you either believe in capitalism, democracy, socialism, communism, and Islamism. The reason that I say Islamism is because the Islamic faith is not only a religious belief, but in many countries it is also political ideology. So the state and the religion is one, and in those cases your religion and the political ideology becomes one. So that's in those cases. But usually you have religion and you have political ideology, which kind of formulates and strengthens your belief. But again, question is, do you really believe in capitalism or democracy, socialism, communism, whatever the ideology are? Do you really believe in it? You usually believe, even if you don't believe in it, you have to live by it because it has to do with your survival. And if you deny the system itself, then you may not survive in the culture or the society or the nation. So which means, you don't have choice. So these are some of the things that you not have chosen to believe, but the belief is imposed to you. So again, ask a question, whose belief? Is it the belief of the government or the authorities or religious leaders who has a power over you, authority over you, so you have to kind of believe? And sometimes it could be your parents who has a particular religion or a particular belief, and you are educated in that system, that belief, which is imposed on you, which means you don't have your own choice about it. Then can you say that it is your belief? So that would be the big question. Next one, the friends. Okay, this is something that you may have some ability and authority to make that particular decision. You can accept or you can reject your friend's belief. You can share the same belief as your friends, but usually when you are in the school, like junior high and high school, if your friends are, they believe in something and you knowingly, unknowingly accept and take that belief as yours. So that's usually the case, but at least you have the choice. Friends cannot make you believe, but they kind of create the, this atmosphere, so you kind of have to believe. Family, the same thing. Media. Today, media ought to be the most effective and influential means and tools creating one's belief. If you are living in a free state, like in America, the media is the number one thing that creates your belief, other than school. So the last two things, media and education, are the two most influential medium, or the thing that helps you or forms your belief. That's why it is important what kind of schools, which schools that you go, and what you watch on your television and your smartphone and so on. And if you're doing a lot of SNS, or you're watching a lot of YouTube, then it's gonna, whether you know it or not, it kind of slowly brainwashes you. And one thing that is dangerous, or which is true with the media, especially this SNS, like a YouTube, is because there's something called algorithm, right? And this algorithm kind of, they decide what you like and what you don't. And then they keep presenting the things they think that you like. And then you go into that direction knowingly or unknowingly. So whose belief is that? And that today, with the development of AI, these AI things make those decisions for you without knowing it. So this is very scary thing, actually, and sometimes dangerous. This, what we call this inclination it's a kind of distortion that we looked at. We just looked at the distortion right there. And inclination by culture, religion, the political ideology, and so on, and especially media and education, you are inclined to believe in certain thing. You are directed toward a certain belief. You without knowing it, especially when you're younger children, young child, they do not have all these ability to make a proper comparison and critical thinking. So they believe what they hear, and that is inclined. You are easily going to have someone, your children, who are inclined to certain ideology, doctrine, or belief. So it is sort of dangerous in that sense. So these are very important domains and areas that formulate one's belief. So the reason that I'm presenting that is when you are doing this apologetics with someone else, what we're trying to look is whose belief he or she is believing. Is that believe in, or that is the kind of information or knowledge that she or he has? Knowledge is totally different than belief. Again, knowledge is not belief. It's only the information. You have to commit yourself to that knowledge, and that knowledge should have holistic. Let me write down that word. holistic influence over you. Holistic influence over you. Meaning it has to have that power to control you and power to control your decision. When that happens, that is belief. So the knowledge is over there, and knowledge cannot affect your everyday existential decisions. So knowledge is an only knowledge. Many of us who are religious or having religion, whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, or Islamic belief, they may not influence your daily personal decision. In that case, it's not holistic, and that's not belief. It's information. So I'm, continuing to make that emphasize between the having the knowledge or knowing the fact, and that's not belief. The belief is right there in your heart, which actually influences your daily decision. What to wear, what to eat, where to live, and so on. These important decisions that you make in your life, or who to marry, these things. When you're trying to make that decision, these important key decisions, that's where your belief is revealed. So true belief, when we ask whose belief are these, many times it's not your belief, but it is someone else's giving you the knowledge and information. You kind of agree, but that's not going to affect how you make your decision in your important life situation. So there is a big gap between what you know in your ideology, in your religious system, but if that does not affect how you live every day, then that's not belief. So when we say belief, it's a very strong and solid thing. Next topic, we'll be dealing with controversies among the beliefs. Let's take a 10 minutes break and please crash. One day you just peacefully one another without having any connections or communication, that would be fine. But the world did not made it that way, so you would have this controversies or the conflicts. Theoretical interaction. This not only happens with the apologetics discussion between the religion with the other religion, but when you're having any academic studies, you'll be looking at these things. So it's called theoretical interaction or theoretical controversies. It's about the principle. It's about the facts. And when you have these differences, controversies regarding the facts and your principles or the belief, then these are some of the ways that you kind of try to understand one another. So the basic function of any apologetics or any good apologetic is to have mutual understanding between two or more parties, two or more. So you may have different ideas, different belief, or different principles than others. One of the very positive and productive way to deal with these differences is to try to learn. You don't necessarily need to accept what others believe or what others think. The least good academic student or mature human being, we want to understand what others are thinking, or believing, or seeing, and so on. So these are some of the ways that we kind of develop that maturity by communicating in these different methods or styles. Let's begin with the argument. Argument is one of the very active way try to proclaim and defend your own position. So argument don't necessarily need to attack others, but you try to defend and fully explain your position, your belief, your knowledge, so he or she, the other, can have good understanding of your thoughts and belief and so on. This ought to be rather aggressive than compared to dialogue or discussion, but it is one of the ways positive. It's again, positive argument is a very positive way to have this mutual understanding regarding different beliefs and thoughts and so on. And one thing that you need to be careful with the argument, especially when you're doing Christian apologetics, try to separate your emotion to this conversation. Easily, the argument can interfere by your own personal emotion. When you see this political debate in America that's televised, like a Trump-Biden debate, those are sort of argument, and then you see that they involve their emotion in it. It's a human nature, and then unless you're really good T versus F. Do you know this? I mean, you're a thinking person, then feeling person. Unless you're a very strong thinking person, then you would easily involve your emotion into this argument. But the principle is, try to avoid and eliminate your personal feelings and emotion as much as possible when you're engaged in this argument. Unless you do that, it doesn't end up as a productive. So argument is a mode of trying to have this very active, sometimes very offensive, aggressive conversation with others regarding what you believe and what you think. Next, discussion is a very neutral definition, a term that is used to have a subject, again, regarding information, knowledge, belief, facts, and so on. And you can discuss, meaning you can talk about it. Talk about it. You don't necessarily need to defend or offend someone, but you're putting yourself on the very objective position rather than subjective position. All the good academic efforts should be objective, meaning from the third person position. So discussion should happen from this objective position, while the argument is not third person position, but you're in that position. You're trying to defend your belief, your thinking, your knowledge, and so on. So that's kind of different perspective regarding this communication. So discussion, you're trying to be neutral and put yourself on the third person position, and then you expect the others or the opponents do the same. So the key would be, are you being objective or subjective? Subjective means you're in your own position, you're trying to defend who you are, what you believe. So when we do apologetics, you can take both argument position or discussion position, but it depends on the situation. So that's discussion. You are kind of talking about, easier word would be talk about the subject that you have difference or controversy or whatever. So that's discussion. Dialogue, again, the word itself has dialogue, dia, and log. Dia means two or between, and log means conversation or talking. So two parties talking one another. So dialogue is very gentle and I would say mature way of having the conversation regarding a particular subject. You could be both subjective and objective, and when we say dialogue, so dialogue is more comprehensive term to include all other sort of communication. So discussion and dialogue is pretty similar, but dialogue is another definition for mutual conversation. Okay, controversy, again, we already discussed. Next term will be assumption. When people try to defend or explain certain position, certain belief, or certain thoughts, then you become assuming something, and from the opponent's position. So each would have his or her own assumption. It's more like a fundamental belief that already exists, and it is there, and you assume, meaning you kind of think it is true. So the assumption is, what it does is facts or information, it assumes facts or information to be true. So that's where you are. So when you are doing a dialogue, apologetic dialogue with other religions or the non-believers from Christian perspective, Christian point of view, you can take your solid position and do the argument or debate. But this assumption is you kind of agree on certain things. So one of the very basic assumption that you want to agree upon is this. What if, that's what if. What if God exists? That's one assumption regarding this conversation with the others as a Christian. Number two, what if the Bible is true. So that's another assumption that you kind of assume when you're beginning this conversation in apologetics. So those are some major examples of assumptions. The third one would be, what if the Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah? So that's sort of assumption. You don't have answers yet, but you're assuming if, what if. And assumption is that kind of statement, what if. So that it kind of presents the case and the subject, what you're trying to discuss and what you're trying to make a conversation. And without assumption that you cannot begin any conversation or academic dialogue. So when you say, what if God exists? You don't conclude God exists. So assumption is without conclusion. So, that's how we begin a good academic conversation, whether it's a subject of religion or science, technology, medicine, whatever the field, you have certain assumptions. These assumptions are the same in, a scientific research. You have certain assumption to begin with when you don't have anything. So this is a very normal and standard procedure in doing good science. You begin with assumption. What if? And your conclusion may say no, that assumption is false, it is not true, or that assumption is true. So two different conclusions, or you can say we do not know. We do not know. One of the things that this assumption is, what if creation is true? And what if evolution is true? The answer, neither. You cannot prove it. So when that happens, if you cannot prove it, that assumption is not valid. So that's one sort of example. Presupposition is pretty much the same as assumption. It's another word for assumption. But presupposition, it kind of lays the difference between the assumption and presupposition is, presupposition, you begin with certain fact that you agree upon. So what you can do for example, Jesus Christ. Okay, you can presuppose that the person in the name of Jesus of Nazareth, actually he is real. Okay, he's a real person in history. There's a person who actually lived and died 2,000 years ago in the land of Palestine, around the Lake of Galilee, and then you can kind of agree, okay, there was Jesus of Nazareth, who is the son of John and Mary. If you agree on that, that becomes like a presupposition. Then you can develop whether he is real, what is written in the gospel, is that true or not? So that's sort of what presupposition do. Okay. Position, perspective, and view. When we are having this dialogue, discussion, argument, sort of those conversation, doing apologetics, you would have your position, which you stand on. And you either believe on certain things or you don't believe. Or you either agree or you don't agree. So that is called your position. That is another name, or to be perspective or view. And that's very important because you want to understand his or her position, perspective, or view on certain things to have productive conversation. You don't necessarily need to agree at the end, but what you can do is, at least you understand what his or her position is by the end of the conversation. So if you do not have that result, then you wasted your time. This not only happens in this apologetics, but any conversation that you would have in your business or as in your family relationship, husband and wife. When you have, you can have, you know that you cannot live without this argument, debate, or dialogue, and so on among your family. But at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, what you want to have is to understand, meaning you don't necessarily agree, but you need to find out what the other's position or view or perspective is. That's what the conversation is about. Then you can either agree or disagree. You either accept or you don't accept. That's going to be the result of the conversation. But many of us are not trained on that kind of conversation, especially when you grow up in, for example, countries like Korea, South Korea, or China, Japan. In this, who we are influenced by this Confucius, Gongjia's ideal, we do not have this training at school to have this productive, creative, critical conversation with others. That's a culture. So it is sometimes difficult for us, those Asians, to have this very academic or productive conversation as many Westerners do. So that's probably, it's not like a inferiority to superiority issue, but that's different culture. And I'm just telling that. But from my personal experience, it is better to learn and have the skill to understand others' position and perspective and view, even though you don't agree with that person, or even that person is your enemy, still you need to understand their position, their view, and their perspective. So that's how we approach as a mature person in regarding these controversial issues. Conflict of interest. You may hear that word in America if you try to live here. This conflict of interest is one of the key idea or terms that runs this society. You are to avoid this conflict of interest as much as possible, but the human existence, it causes us to have this conflict of interest every day, in everyday life situation, whether it's a money, whether it's a power issue, or whether it's a relationship in your business company that you work in, or even your family. So every situation demands the conflict of interest. What we mean by conflict of interest is that you have certain interest, meaning that you have a stake or the how do you say, the value into this thing or situation or person or even decision, then the other would have the same interest on the same subject, same material, same person, same situation, and so on. And there's only one, and that you cannot share that. And then when that happens, it becomes conflict of interest. You are interested in it, and the other is also interested in it, wants to have it, wants to control it, and then you have this conflict. Because, America is a capitalistic society, that term, conflict of interest, is very key. So the question is, you cannot deny the conflict of interest, but find very sensible way or rational way to resolve the conflict of interest. So what the apologetics, Christian apologetics, when we try to do it, is try to find this very positive resolution between two different ideas and belief. And by doing so, it's the apologetic is, the purpose of apologetic is not evangelism again. I'm telling you this over and over again. We're not trying to make this conversion of faith to someone else, to Christianity. That's evangelism. Of course, some of the evangelism, when you do the evangelism, it does involve the element of apologetics. But the apologetic itself is not to make that conversion or convert others, but to explain it in a neutral way. So he or she that you're speaking to will understand the Christianity better, while you will have better knowledge of their religion or their position. So that would be the basic groundwork where you can avoid this conflict of interest into the negative ways. So it has to be, the outcome has to be positive, productive, and it should make you more mature and more knowledgeable as well. So that's what we are trying to get out of this apologetics. One of the key framework when you are a student, whatever your subject is, this will help you to look into how you do your own study, especially the level after the high school, what we call post-high school education, like a college, university, and then if you do the master's and doctorate, then you need to have this framework in your mind. And this is a very important mindset of Western culture or Westerners. Again, comparing the Western and us Asian cultures, we do not have developed, we were not educated in this kind of a framework, but we are told to learn, and you either accept or you don't. You don't have this process, but you are told, and then the knowledge kind of pours into you, and if you are capable, you will take them and then retain them and accept them. And there is no like a critical thinking or making judgment on what you hear. That's not how we were educated when we were young and as we grow up. But in Western culture, in Western the school system, especially in America, you learn to do this from very early age. I mean, it begins in the preschool. So the mindset for Americans, at least, I mean, European as well, but in America, this is how you will make your choice and how you learn and how you become who you are. So this happens as early as preschool, and those who are really the American parents, third, fourth generation American immigrants from Europe, they teach their kids from a very early age to do this, be able to do that. So you're going to observe with your own eyes, and you when you observe, you perceive. So once you perceive, then you are going to reason. To have a reason, you have to have your own thoughts, your own likings, your own principles, and the parents and the teachers help you to develop that reasoning resource. For us Christians, for example, we are reasoning within the biblical teachings. What the Bible teaches you, that becomes the foundation for your reasoning. Meaning you are making decisions, critical decisions, whether to, this is true or not, whether this is good or bad, and so on. And that's going to be your critical decision, and it's called reasoning. So you see or hear, and then you make your own reasons and make that decision. And then to do that, to make that decision, you have to do the research and find out what you know, or what you believe, what you think is correct or not. And so as a result of that reasoning, thinking, evaluating, validating, making that decision, comes out what we call findings. That's a result of this reasoning process. So again, you see or hear, the perceive, and then you make a reasoning, and the decisions, evaluation, then you either accept or you don't. That's called findings. And to do that, you validate. So you don't accept all the findings, the result. And you're going to make whether that is valid for you or not. In other words, does it have value for you? So that's called validate. And then theorize. So you come back and look at the whole process and then kind of make a theory out of it. In other words, it becomes your principle. So that would be a very basic academic process everyone does when you are a student. And that applies to your own life as well again. So instead of theory, when it becomes your life situation, it's a life principle. And as you look at your own personal life, you know that you have certain life principles that you kind of try to keep and maintain and abide by. And when you think, where did it come from? Actually, without knowing or knowing, by conscious or unconscious, you did this process. You have observed, and you kind of reason whether this is true or not, and then you kind of find out the facts or truth, and then you validate it again, and then you either accept that as your principle or you don't accept it. So that would be the very basics of doing any academic process or research. Now, next term, fundamental premises. Whether you're Christian or not, whether you're atheist or someone with any particular religion, there are a few things that all the human beings has to agree upon. For example, death. Death is one of the fundamental premises. All the human beings, whether they live less than a year or more than 100 years, people, human beings, do die. You cannot avoid. So the birth and the death, life and death is a very basic premises. So that's something that you cannot deny, but have to accept as a truth. So there are a few fundamental premises that we agree upon as we begin that conversation. Either it's a dialogue, argument, or debate, whatever the conversation style form is regarding this subject of apologetics. We agree that human beings all die. Then the question rises, two questions from the premises. What happens after death? Is the death the end of everything? That would be the question number one. Then the second question is more applicable, and it's more philosophical, is why human being has to die. Why? Why the death? So these are two key questions that would arise from this fundamental premises. This is what happened like 1,000 years ago. As early as human being exist, they would have this question regardless of their knowledge or experience or whatever. If these human beings, it could be like those ancient people like named Daltons or whatever these anthropologists named them 30,000 or 60,000 years ago, or even 500,000 years ago. If the human exists at that time, they would have asked this very philosophical question, and then scientific question: what happens after death? That's it's not philosophical, it's scientific question, but why people has to die, it would be a philosophical question. And these two questions had been there for 1,000 years. And all the religion and ideology tries to deal with that very question, because it's a fundamental premises. So all these, the apologetic questions that we are to discuss between two different or the other parties regarding the belief, it starts right there, fundamental premises. Another fundamental premises, God. Someone or some force, let's say, or someone who is above human ability. You can name that as an alien who's flying with these UFOs, or someone beyond this universe. Whatever your imagination is, there got to be something or somebody that caused us to exist. So that's a question regarding the life. So what is life? Where does life came from? And then all these things that related to us living like a universe, these would be the very premises, fundamental premises that people think about. So the apologetics, whether it's a Christian or other religion or any kind of philosophical discussion, it would start from this fundamental premises of life and death, and then the in between, which I call existence. So life, existence, and death are three basic fundamental premises, or the topic or the subject of any good apologetics. Okay, you can sign out, begin to sign out. Okay, a little announcement. Since this is being the Lunar New Year, the first day of the year for many us Asians, the school is again providing little refreshment after the class. So if you can stay, you can have, it's not going to be the full lunch, but you can have some refreshment. I understand there is someone who wasn't able to get anything last week. So try to be moderate and taking the food. Okay. Continue. Theoretical framework. Beyond human reasons. It says mechanics first message, and then Trinity, virgin birth, and so on. People, as a human being, personally, individually, there are things that you may not fully understand and explain with common sense or your experience, your knowledge, or even with the science and medicine. There are things that you may not able to fully understand and explain. And it's beyond physics or natural science, but these things happen and it is there. Whether it's you're seeing the ghost. How many of you saw actually the spirit or ghost? Any? No? At least there are a couple. See, when you see these ghosts, either you're at home or somewhere else, you actually saw it and you know it, and then there's no scientific explanation about seeing and encountering these spirits. So those are things that is what we call beyond human reasons. None of us actually saw God, but many of us do agree there has to be someone who is bigger and more powerful than us. And that's beyond human reasoning. So you acknowledge that you do not understand everything and we cannot explain everything. But yet, the apologetics try to do our best to make some sense of these invisible, incomprehensive spiritual matters that human reasons cannot cover. So here's a mechanics and message. What I mean by the mechanics and message is some of the things that we experience or we see or hear, it's not so much about the facts or some of those visible and tangible things, but it has to do with the meaning or the message. So, in the life, some of the things are significant, meaning it is important. There are things that you cannot explain in your own life and your own experience, but you know it does have this significance or the importance in your life. It can be very personal and individual. You cannot explain to others, but you know this particular moment or particular experience or particular person that you encounter, they are important. You just know it. And then there's no way to explain in a rational way to others or persuade them, but you know that it is important. It is important to you, but it may not be any importance to others. So what we are trying to do in apologetic is to try to focus on the meaning and the message rather than the formulation or the formal process or so on. So that's what it is. An example like a Trinity, virgin birth, resurrection of Jesus, these things, sometimes there's no possible full mechanics that you can explain. So as a result, these are things beyond the natural science or physical science, and we need to accept that as within the discussion. So some of the things that we are going to discuss, we discuss in the process of apologetics. It may not agree with the science or natural science or the physical science. Presumption and assumption, already talked about it. Then thesis, theme, and topic. These are the terms that we need to understand in also doing in other studies. Okay, so if you are trying to pursue further education beyond the college level or including the college level, we need to understand what the thesis and the theme and topic is. Topic is the subject of discussion, what we are trying to discuss. For example, let's see, where did it go? Okay, existence of God. Whether it's a biblical God or some other gods, or Yahweh, Allah, depending on which culture and religion you're from. But let's say we are discussing the existence of God. That's going to be the topic. And the theme or thesis is, in Christian belief, we believe He, the God, exists 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. That ought to be the thesis of Christian belief regarding the existence of God. So this ought to be quite different from the Islamic belief or Jewish belief that God is only one and one God, and then there is no other God, and God cannot be 3. So the same topic, existence of God, but 2 different or 3 different versions of the interpretation or the theme or a thesis. Thesis is what we say or talk about that particular topic. So that is defined as thesis. Okay. We'll continue this discussion next week, and thank you for your attention. And again, there's going to be some refreshment. If you can join, you're welcome to join it. Okay, see you guys next week. And Happy New Year.